I guess so. Thanks everybody for joining us today for enabling the changemakers, redesigning the Princeton School of Public International Affairs website on Drupal 8. My name is John Cloys. I'm the Web Services Manager at Princeton University.
And I'm Suzanne Dergacheva. I'm one of the co-founders of Evolving Web. And we collaborated on this project, John's team and my team, to relaunch this website. It launched in July, so just a couple months ago. So we're really excited today to be able to share what we learned and how the process went, and what the results were. So for those of you who are looking to do a similar kind of project, hopefully you'll get some good tips of how to proceed. So to start off with, we'll talk a little bit about what we were trying to do and what Princeton was trying to achieve when they set out to run their migration to Drupal 8. As many of you know, moving from one major version of Drupal to another is a big project, at least for Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, that's the case. And so in doing so, it's not like something to take lightly. It's often an opportunity to make lots of improvements. So maybe John, you can talk a little bit about what the university was trying to achieve with this project.
Sure. So I'll start out with some goals. As Suzanne mentioned, the school was really looking to develop sort of a more usable, modern website that enabled some collaboration, and really showcased the work of our faculty, students, and staff, and also sparked some interest in public policy and international affairs, not only at Princeton, but around the world. And we were coming from Drupal 7, and really it was a sort of glorified electronic brochure site. The content was really not well organized. Some of the videos and images were really hidden and didn't really complement some of the research that we had there. And it really just sort of needed to start with a clean slate and have a better user experience, especially for the content editors and people on the admin side. So we started with assembling a team. And really on the Princeton side, it was myself and Julius Chung. And then from the Evolving Web side, we had a dedicated project manager, a UX designer, a front-end developer, and more of a back-end developer, as well as a solutions architect. And this was really helpful to sort of have a dedicated person and a dedicated contact to go to when any questions came about throughout the project. It was helpful to have that resource for us.
So it was really nice at the beginning of the project. We actually, this was back in September, well, about a year ago now, exactly a year ago. We did some on-site workshops, which was a great way to gather input from the stakeholders at the beginning of the project and also talk to some users to figure out what we really needed to achieve. And we got a really good sense this way of what the priorities should be, of some of the user journeys that we needed to facilitate, and even just to figure out the overall goals. So I feel like this process, nowadays we're doing the same types of workshops online, but really doing it in person, we were able to hone in more on the priorities of the school. So we'll talk a little bit more about those workshops, because I think those are often the keys to success of a project. The first workshop that we ran was one where we gathered many stakeholders. I think there were maybe altogether 12 people who attended, and that included faculty at the university, the dean of the faculty of the university and the dean of the school. And we also had the staff would be making changes to the content, so communications. John and Julia were there, of course, and then we even had some stories from students. So we had one student who came to share his perspective, and we also got some other student kind of stories in there to figure out what we really needed to build. If you want to go to the next slide, we have some. We kind of started off by walking through the overall goal of the school, kind of to figure out more the identity and the positioning. And what was really useful for us here was, we're familiar with higher education. We work a lot with universities, but knowing what differentiates one school from all the rest really helps us figure out what messaging to put on the website, what we need to communicate, and how the visual identity also needs to be differentiated. And when we did this exercise, we had the results, I think. John, if you go to the next slide. The results that we found that were maybe a bit more surprising is that while the goal of the school is to educate the students and convey the curriculum and create this environment for learning, there is also a goal to share that research with the world. And looking at the previous website in Drupal 7, I don't think it was that obvious what all these research results were. And there was also a lot of great content hidden, things like the school's podcast, which is fascinating content. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were highlighting this content as well, and not just the information about the programs from an academic perspective. So in the workshops, one of the first things we did is we went through the personas that we knew were the key audiences for the website. And the obvious ones are kind of prospective students and faculty. There were different types of students. In this case, graduate students are the main focus, but there's also an undergraduate population that does attend and takes an undergraduate program. And then we also realized that policymakers, because of this emphasis on research and thought leadership, policymakers and the public are a key audience as well. And for each of these personas, I know it's pretty standard to do personas, and it's nice to kind of think about your users, to put yourself into their shoes and think about their background. But I think with personas, the key is to figure out what the main tasks are for each persona, and to figure out what the pain points are currently, and kind of what their goals are, what would make their life easier in redoing the website. What are those opportunities? So for each persona, we went through these and we came up with some goals. And this became the lens for all the rest of the work that we did. So after going through the personas as part of this workshop, we also went and gathered all the existing content and did a card sorting exercise. So this is where we get to ask, what is the top priority content? Who are the top priority personas? And how do we lay out the content so that it makes the most sense to those groups? And then you end up with a lot of messy sticky notes. And we take this back to the office and clean it up. And eventually it becomes something that actually looks like a sitemap. And for this, we use a tool called FlowMap. I know there's lots of sitemap building tools out there. The thing I like about FlowMap is that it lets you add annotations. So even at this stage, when we're just talking about the high level architecture, it's useful to start thinking at the level of what's the purpose of each page, what are the content priorities, what is some messaging that we need to make sure to include on these pages so that personas or users can get to the next step. And then I would say the trickiest thing about this website in terms of the high-level information architecture, it was to figure out how to organize the information about admissions and programs. So while there's a lot of information about all the programs on offer, there's also information about how to apply to those programs. And there's definitely some overlap between those things. And we can imagine that a user coming to the site for the first time might be researching the information about the programs to kind of compare it with other schools. Whereas coming back to the site, having decided to apply, you might be looking for more information about dates for the application process and more specifics about what's required. And so given the overlap between that content, we really wanted to make it clear where certain information was. So we decided to run a tree test, just a very simple usability testing technique, where we presented a couple different versions of the sitemap, and we asked users to, we assigned them one version, and then we asked them to find certain information. So I think one of the things was we asked them to find scholarship information. And then we saw if they were able to click through into that content and if it was easy for them to find. So that kind of helped us with some of those uncertainties in the sitemap. And the result is a menu structure that I think is a lot simpler than the Drupal 7 version. I think it's one of the things we were really able to achieve was something more straightforward.
Perfect. Thanks, Suzanne. And with that in mind, we look at the personas and the sort of information architecture, and we move to sort of the wireframes. And really at that stage, it's sort of how do those elements come together? What is the various structures and interactions of those key pages, like Suzanne was mentioning, the admissions, the programs? How do those link back to the user personas? And more importantly, sort of at the 30,000-foot view, how did those link to the goals of the school and the goals of the university? Again, through this process, we really wanted to provide a more clear and focused and content-driven UX experience with clear call to actions. Again, really surfacing those student pieces and research stories, all the while highlighting some social media efforts as well, beyond sort of the standard footer buttons and those types of things.
In terms of the visual design, we knew we had to use the Princeton brand, but we had the flexibility of building out that brand in a slightly different way than, say, the main Princeton website. And so we took the color palette and the logo and some of those pillars of the brand, and we built out a style guide to show how they would be displayed on this particular website. The feedback that we heard is we need more orange. I think one of our first versions had a lot more blue. So that was kind of like clear direction there in terms of what the Princeton brand should be. And key to this process was figuring out how to make sure that all of our components were accessible. That was really nice to see that was a priority, not just on the technical side, but even when we presented these options, these different kind of palettes to the stakeholders, even the stakeholders like the faculty of the school mentioned, oh, are we sure that this is accessible? And that's always wonderful to hear. So we kind of got some direction on the overall styling and then built those out and started to create more concrete a more concrete style kit, like a UI kit, to show how different elements would be displayed. And from there, we built mock-ups to style the actual wireframes.
And you can see a couple of examples of those here with some iconography. Again, we sort of introduced this this darker blue, but not to be confused with some of our Ivy peers and university peers as well. So then sort of putting this all together, you have these personas, this information architecture, this beautiful design, and putting it on the page. And here we really tried to simplify the design so we could reuse some of these components and really help sort of with that cognitive load as you go from page to page. You sort of know what to expect. And here you can see an early mock-up of the graduate admissions page, just with a header image, call to action, and then just sort of this 3-card collection highlighting some of our pillar programs down there at the bottom. As you scroll down, we have that sort of admissions timeline, which highlights some of those very important key dates and information that we found out through the usability testing that we did. Also, we found out that our students tend to go to the blog a lot to try to find out information, see what was done in years past, and what information they need to do to succeed, to put their best foot forward when applying to the school. And then scrolling even further down the page, we have, again, pertinent information through iconography about financial aid, career development, etc. One thing that we implemented actually soon after launch was a better search mechanism, and we really tried to segment this out to sort of anticipate why users might be searching. One of the things that we want to try to highlight too is sort of this topical organizational structure to our research and news stories. And I thought this was a nice touch and look forward to iterating on this in the coming weeks and months.
So we'll talk a little bit about some of the features of the actual Drupal 8 site that was the result of all this work. The focus really was on implementing these pages that just had a clear messaging and a better kind of content strategy behind them. And how we implemented this, we decided to go with a paragraphs approach. So a lot of those pages that you've been seeing these screenshots of, those are built up with a series of paragraphs. We created an events calendar that pulls some event data from the Princeton timeline, which is the kind of campus-wide calendar system, so we don't have to always duplicate that content. And compared to kind of the previous version of the calendar, it's a lot simpler. It's not just like a calendar grid, but it shows these squares. The menu, I was really excited to see how the menu turned out. I'm always wary of these mega menus that can be overloaded with information. I thought of this as kind of like a mini mega menu, because even though it takes up a nice chunk of the page, it takes up some visual space, and it has that call to action in it, it's actually always the same call to action as you go from link to link. So it's not bombarding you with extra information that you have to hover over the menu to see.
And again, I just want to highlight there, I thought that call to action specifically in the menu bar was a nice touch because, as we go into admission season or launch a new podcast or a blog or whatever have you, it's yet another way to sort of surface some highlighted information.
So as I was mentioning, we decided to use paragraphs to build out these flexible landing pages that make up a lot of the kind of high level content on the website. And I know John and I might have wanted to use the layout builder because we were excited to use the latest thing in Drupal. But we decided to use paragraphs to keep the options simpler and to kind of simplify the process for content editors, especially when we were launching the new site, just to make that onboarding simpler. Also, because of the way the layout of the site came together, all the components that we were creating didn't require actually having a layout that we could, drag and drop content that would have to be side by side. So it was simple enough that paragraphs was a good fit.
Again, and we found living in this site for roughly 2.5 months now, that simplicity has really empowered some of those basic site builders to really take ownership of these pages, which was a key goal, because it's very hard to manage so many different pages with different dates, especially in this current environment. Things change very, very quickly, and we wanted to make sure that those pages, again, highlighted the most pertinent information, most accurate information, and through the limited layout, but being flexible with imagery and typography and the like. It's proven to be great just in the first few months. So.
I think John already mentioned the search features that kind of highlight keywords as you start to search. One of the other things that we introduced into the site was this organization around research topics. And so that's clear in the search results as well. There's also a directory that makes it easier to find experts or faculty with expertise in different topics. So that's kind of all united in the search experience. So some of the keys to success, things that went really well in this project that we hoped to do again in future projects, and things that I would recommend. We really were able to prioritize the user experience and accessibility. And we were able to do that because we had that buy-in from the whole team. So, John and Julia, as the maintainers of the site, the owners of the site, they were able to prioritize that and get the stakeholders on board with just making sure that we weren't trying to add a million new features. We were really focused on making the site easier to use for everyone, front end and back end. So the component-based design really aligned with that, because it meant that for each page, we were able to define the purpose of the page, and then construct the page with the right pieces of content, making sure that those were in place and styled consistently. And it also enabled us to use mostly Drupal core. So there are some modules, of course, like Search API and things like this that add some of the required features, but there's not a long list of contributed modules to share because we're not using very many. The migration planning also, we started that from day one, so we knew right away what content we were going to automatically migrate and what content we were going to just rewrite. And part of that came into play because we were meant to start the project, I think, in the summer, and summer's not a great time to start a project. At Princeton especially, a lot of the stakeholders were away, so we started with that migration planning, and we kind of knew what we were going to do even before we had that first UX workshop. We also decided to launch the site in Drupal 8. It came out, really close to the launch of Drupal 9, but just to make sure that we could launch really smoothly, we decided to stick with Drupal 8. But we did that planning to use, mostly Drupal core, to use a limited set of modules, and then right away we're just able to assess what it would take to move to Drupal 9, and that Drupal 9 readiness is underway. So I think the site will be in Drupal 9 shortly.
Definitely, and I just want to circle back to more of the content side. It was really beneficial from the beginning to to sort of have most of the content done, very early on in the process, especially given the pandemic and that a lot of people aren't able in this time to gather around in the same room. But it really sort of made that design and implementation and delivery phase much, much smoother. And again, it gave us the ability to sort of limit that content freeze, as Suzanne noted there as well.
So in terms of the tools we used, I know I always love to go to case studies because I like to hear what other people are using. We got to use real sticky notes and whiteboards in our in-person workshops. These days, Evolving Web is doing similar work for other clients, and we're using Miro as our virtual whiteboard, but I have to say it's not as fun. The flow map is the tool we were using for the site to build the sitemap and to do those annotations. And then our design team uses Sketch, and then we use InVision to share that and get feedback from everybody and gather all the content, all the comments. We used Optimal Workshop, which has this tree jack tool for the tree testing that I was showing to compare different versions of the sitemap and do some simple usability testing. There are lots of other tools out there, though, that you can use for tree testing. We did have a Slack channel set up between our teams, so we could just have really quick back and forth communication as needed. And then we also set up a Basecamp so that we'd have some shared issues where we could share deliverables and have to-do lists and things like that. So the launch was really fun. John, do you want to talk
Yes.
about what happened with the launch?
Sure, sure. The launch was, yes, yes, quite fun indeed. So for those of you that don't know, the Woodrow Wilson School changed its name to the Princeton School of Public International Affairs pretty much a week before we launched. And over a holiday week for both companies or both parties involved. So that was really really quite challenging, but it really tested us for what we built and the ability to change sort of rapidly, literally on a dime, and so we were able to just quickly swap out some of the branding and look at some of the content and change some of that surface level content and literally do that within probably about 72 hours, and then the sort of the rest is history. But it made me feel really good right out of the gate that we were able to sort of respond to those needs very, very quickly. And again, that's proven very beneficial during this time. That's when things are changing very rapidly.
And in fact, the site was even launched a little bit earlier than planned because of the name change, because we realized it would be easier to change the name just on the new site. So
Exactly.
that was the first time, I think, ever in my experience where we've launched the site before it was planned to be launched.
Yeah. So, as we've sort of highlighted, the results here is I hope it's something that's a little bit more engaging, more thoughtful. And if anything has taught us about 2020, it's connection, not perfection. So it's definitely a work in progress. But it feels really good to sort of have that, those solid building blocks to able to pivot and really speak to the changing times. Here's a little bit about those research topics where we wanted to highlight again some of those content areas that speak also to the strategic priorities of the school, but also to the university. So this is just one way that we're aligning to that as well.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I know that I looked carefully over the Drupal 7 site when we first got familiar with the project. And then I've been browsing the site since we launched the new version. And there's just all this wealth of research that I've discovered that I didn't find ever on the Drupal 7 site. So just as a user, a lot of this great content has been surfaced, and hopefully it's being shared with more and more people. And I think the site also does a good job of inspiring, just in its kind of simplicity in the design, as you've seen from the screenshots. You know, the design is, it really allows you to focus on the content and the messaging. And I find that does leave space for more of this inspiration that we can get.
Definitely. So yeah, thank you everybody. Like I said, it's been quite the wild ride with the name change and the current environment, but it's been very fun, and it's very helpful to have a solid base of a tool that you can use and flex as needed.
Yeah. So I just want to go to the chat. I think I've seen there's some questions. Okay, so somebody's asking, was multilingual handled for this site? So no, the website is only in English. At Evolving Web, we're based in Montreal, so most of our websites are actually in English and French, and it's a little bit easier when you're only handling one language.
There was a question about a module that we use for the calendar. I think we pretty much leverage Drupal core for that, but specifically on the Princeton side, I mentioned timeline, and from that, the way we connect is just through a JSON feed, and so again, that's sort of built in Drupal core. So that was a nice thing there as well.
And someone was asking which virtual whiteboard tool I was mentioning. We use Miro. I've tried Mural as well, and you know, there's several of these tools available right now, so I recommend trying them all.
So there's a couple of questions. How many members of your team? As I highlighted in the beginning, on the Princeton side, there was 2 people a part of the core team and the core process. Of course, it takes a village. So we have a couple of content managers and writers on our side as well. So I guess from our side total, there's about 6 people involved, and then from the Evolving Web side, at least that many, 6, 7, or 8, something like
Yeah,
that.
there were about maybe 6 on our side. It was great to see on the Princeton side, the 2 of the content, that the kind of main content writers on the site actually came out to Drupal Camp, New Jersey, earlier this year, February. And it's just great to see the enthusiasm behind not just, oh, we're updating our website, but really like, oh, I'm going to embrace this and really learn how to use the tool. And then on our side, one of the things, like usually we might have a bigger team, but our front-end developer, Ferhat, is also a designer. So he played both roles on this project, which is not common. Usually we have a separate designer and a separate front-end developer, but the real benefit is that I think you can see kind of in the details of the site, especially if you actually go to the site itself. There's a lot of small details that he added that a front-end developer might not have picked up on, just little hover effects and things like that.
I just want to highlight a couple of other questions here. It says, how many content types did you end up with? And again, really the goal here was to keep things simple. So I literally think, I just looked, I think we ended up with right now, we only have 5 content types. And so I think that's a testament to itself. Additionally, that sort of translates to those paragraph bundles. I would say there's 10 or 12 at best. I mean, and again, I really wanted to keep things lean, mean, and close to core, and really so we could keep an eye on Drupal 9 and just give us some flexibility as we move forward.
I'm always one when I look at designs, when I'm kind of reviewing the wireframes, I'm always the one to kind of count, okay, how many paragraphs types or how many block types are we going to have to build? And I like keeping those variations small. I know on other sites that we've built recently, we put some variations into the hands of the content editors, like here's some different options for how a certain paragraph will display on the page. In this case, we didn't even have that many options, I think, in this regard. Like the display of each is pretty consistent. And that does make it a little easier also for the content editors when you're opening up these tools to a wider set of content editors if the options are just really simple. I guess that's it for questions.
Yes, any other questions? I think Suzanne's going to post the slides for sure.
Yeah, I'll put them up on the, one last question. Okay, how long did the content migration take? I'm actually not sure.
I don't know for exactly how long, but I do want to highlight that we were able to get started a lot very early on. And I was very happy that we did some of that groundwork in the beginning. And because of that, we were able to sort of uh, get rid of some of the historical content that oftentimes gets migrated for historical purposes or whatever have you. We just sort of picked a date. I think it was around 2015, and anything before that is going to be archived with the old site, and that really helped along with the process running those scripts. I'm pretty sure.
And we love working with real content. So I think on this site, we really tried hard to not have any lorem ipsum anywhere. All the pages, we really tried to work always with real content. When we were doing the designs and the builds and everything. So I find doing content migration early really helps with that. Yeah, so thanks everyone for coming out. It was great to see you all here at GovCon. Virtual high five to John on launching the site.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
And thanks for all your great questions.
Have a great weekend.
You too, John. Susan, thank you for the great presentation.
Thanks, EJ.